Yields, I now recognize Mr. Goldman for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Borelli, I have a couple of quotes that I want to read to you, and let me know if you know who said them. First, quote, "Migrants get more attention and resources than any other group in the city, and we are just turning New York into the world's refugee camp." Do you know who said that?
Well, that sounds like me.
It was. Next, quote, "They seem to be on the whole an honest class, but they are continually brought before the courts for fighting, violence, and attempts at murder, crimes which arise from the crowded way in which they live and the jealousies and quarrels that would naturally arise from such a promiscuous mode of life. But the children, as they grow up, will naturally and inevitably form the criminal class of this city." Do you know what group of newly arrived immigrants that this quote referred to?
I would say 19th century immigrants, Italy, Ireland, maybe.
Italians. It's from an 1882 New York Times editorial about Italian immigrants coming to New York City, which were sadly reflective of a really disgusting common sentiment at the time. And you're a member of New York City Council's Italian Caucus, right? Right?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree with that assessment of Italians as forming the criminal class of New York City?
No, sir.
And you have been fear-mongering on this issue, as have my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, about the, quote, criminals coming across the border. But you are aware, are you not, Mr. Borelli, that the amount of crime from the migrants who have arrived in New York City is far lower than the average crime rate in the city, correct?
I'm unaware, but I'll assume since you're saying it in public, it's true. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I have a bunch I want to get through. And I think, you know, one of the things that frustrates us on this side of the aisle in New York City about some of your rhetoric, and I represent the district that includes the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. My grandmother escaped anti-Semitism to come through Ellis Island, as so many of our forefathers did. The Statue of Liberty states, quote, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." And that is the New York way. New York City has always welcomed immigrants. Immigrants are what make that city the most dynamic in the country and have built its success. And we must welcome immigrants that are fleeing horrific conditions in their countries, in Central and South America. And I applaud the Biden administration for announcing a reinvestment into those countries to stabilize them and improve their economies. In your opening statement, you identify a lot of problems that we have, Mr. Borelli, very few solutions. But I want to ask you a couple questions about some solutions. You noted one of the migrants has an asylum date of 2033. You would agree that part of the problem that we have are asylum delays, is that right? Expediting court cases would be helpful, correct.
And would it be helpful to have more immigration judges to help expedite that backlog?
I assume part of that problem is the lack of judges.
Yeah. You've talked about, and we've all talked about, the problem with fentanyl and the cartels. In fact, my colleague from Texas just say that the cartels control the border and control the fentanyl trade. You would agree, would you not, that if the cartels did not have weapons of war, they would have less control over the border? Is that correct?
I don't know how they have control in Mexico, but I just met with the Office of Special...
So are you aware that they have a lot of guns?
The majority of the deaths in my district of drugs have trace amounts of fentanyl in it.
Right, so fentanyl's a problem, controlled, as my colleagues say, by the cartels, who have as much as 90% of their guns come from America. You would agree more visas, lawful visas would help, right? More than 50% of Fortune 500 CEOs are either immigrants or children of immigrants. If we had more lawful visas, that would reduce the amount of immigration coming across our border. And then finally, I just want to ask, the business community in New York City, as I'm sure you know, has come out in favor of granting migrants work authorization, right? Do you agree with that?
Work authorizations are certainly part of the solution, but it's unclear why we would have to prioritize people for work authorizations who have not followed the law thus far.
We don't need to prioritize it, but would you agree that those, would you agree, my last question, sir, would you agree that the 180-day waiting period should be reduced after someone applies for asylum to get a work authorization?
I would agree that there are work authorizations that could be granted for the thousands of people that you and I both represent, who have families waiting overseas, who have to date applied and follow
exactly the business. And just if I could wrap up because my time's almost over, and that is correct. The business community wants people to work, and we want people to work. Every single one of those proposals I just mentioned are Democratic legislative proposals. None of them are included in H.R. 2 or any Republican proposals because they're not interested in solving the problem. They're interested in starving our border, starving our Department of Homeland Security so that it continues to fail for their political benefit. And I yield back. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.